Welcome back to Higher Exchanges, the #1 independent cannabis investing show in the world. I'm your host, Jesse Redmond, Chief Strategy and Investor Relations Officer at Leaf Brands. And I'm joined once again by the smartest cannabis investor I know. He is the co-founder of Poseidon. He's Morgan Paxia. Morgan, we had some backstage drama. We fought through it. It was not fighting and drama between you and I. It was fighting with technology, but here we are.
Here we are. Congrats on the new title. It's a great title.
Thank you.
Much deserved.
Thank you. It is a mouthful, but I think it is descriptive. So it's kind of a battle between those things. And yeah, it feels good, man. Been with the company for about a year. And my goal when I joined was to kind of, I don't know, be humble, maybe not ask for the world up front and try and prove yourself and have a good year together. And I think the company thought I had a good year and Leaf had an awesome year. I don't know that that's always reflected in the share price at all, but with the farm in New York and everything we have cooking, the company had a great year too. So feels good to double down and plenty to work on and get excited about in 26.
It's such a Gen X way of approaching things, which I appreciate very much. Of don't go in with expecting promotions every 6 months and lots of kudos and praise, but just go in there and do the good work. And and be an advocate. But I think that's just a way I feel much more comfortable about in business than maybe some of these younger kids these days expectations are in the workforce. So
yeah, I like it too. I think it's better for everybody. I mean, I covered Leaf for a year as an analyst, so I got to know him better then. Then I joined full time in January of 25. Spent another year, together. And then I think, after, know each other that long and, showing the commitment, man, like it's one thing, we talk about in the industry, but it's one thing to show up for a week, a month, 6 months, even a year, but just to keep showing up, keep having the integrity, keep doing the work when it doesn't feel like the reward is there is something that I think is hard. And I agree. That's something that I see missing. I have a 16-year-old son. And he thinks that, making, 6 figures is going to be the easiest thing in the world right away. And from there, he's going to go up to 7 figures. And yeah, there's a level of maybe, I don't know if it's optimism or lack of realism sometimes with the younger generation, or maybe a difference in terms of the expectation in terms of I think we were geared up, maybe the generation before us, even more so, maybe every generation says this, but I feel like the older generations have more of that work ethic installed, and with the kids these days seeing all the influencers making money so quickly, I think it's tainted their little brains.
It is, and I don't know how we come back from that, but there still is a good way of doing things, and so I just appreciate doing good work, and as you said, showing up. It's not been an easy time, but the work continues, and the good ones find a way through.
How have things been with you?
Oh man, it's just, it's just crazy. This is, things are more active than ever. And it's like, once I feel like we've got, a group of things going, more things come into the hopper. And so it's moving and grooving in the Poseidon world. We've got a lot of activity going on. So I know there's a lot of work to do to get these things across the finish line, but we are fast across the starting line on a lot of stuff. So, which is great. I mean, it's just great for where we are as an industry, but for our investors that have been through this tough cycle too. And I'm very excited about the opportunity to send out updates saying, hey, we got some distributions coming your way. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's good recognition for a lot of these founders too that have persevered, and to be able to do that for their shareholders, I think is a point of pride. So it's crazy. I mean, it's kind of just jumping right into our first topic of the day. But I mean, just upon signing the executive order, just that it's just been a historic perception shift.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is right. I think there's another implication there, Morgan, where I've talked to most of the cannabis venture funds in the last year or so, and most of them are in the situation where they put out the money, they have a little bit of money left for follow-ons, they don't have any fresh capital to put in, the funds are getting towards the end of their life cycle, and if you guys could have a good last year here, have some exits and some better returns for those investors, the implication isn't just you have those happy investors. The implication is there may be another cycle of money coming if you have more success. And so, not just because we're friends, but for all of the founders out there and all the VC funds, all the private stuff, the more success we can have there, the more that's going to drive new investment and fuel more growth, I think.
Yeah, 100%. It's been tough in venture as a category. Forget about cannabis. I mean, we kind of led into the capital drought cycle in VC, and it seems like we're potentially emerging first, which is great. I mean, outside of pockets of AI and stuff like that, but I mean, otherwise we're seeing notable activity, which is great. But I mean, talking to so many different investment banks, they're seeing it too. I mean, there still is a tremendous amount of private equity out there looking for opportunities to consolidate fragmented spaces. And I mean, how better can you define cannabis than that? Massively fragmented, ripe for consolidation. Valuations are attractive. This isn't like things are bid up to the moon at this point. So it's a very attractive proposition. Low valuations don't necessarily translate to fantastic returns or even, modest returns, but just to your point of unlocking liquidity is just a major first step that we have not had for too long. So
yeah. Well, it's awesome, man. I'm happy for you guys. We've got a busy agenda here, Morgan. But before we get into these 5 hard questions that we're going to talk through, do you want to tell me a little bit about Flowhub and this awesome partnership they're having with Cheech and Chong?
Yeah. So Cheech and Chong is, I think, is taking a really interesting approach to, kind of like a franchise-like model. I don't want to say it's a franchise model because I don't think we're still allowed to call it that in cannabis, being it's still illegal, federally illegal. But the idea is, they get these stores, they partner with stores that want to utilize basically their back end and their branding, and they want to make sure that they have a strong back end to support these stores, and technology is at the forefront of that. And so great to see them partnering with our partner, Flowhub, in doing that and providing point of sale across the Cheech and Chong ecosystem. So I think it's really cool. I'm excited for Flowhub. I think it's a great way for Cheech and Chong to go more of an asset light approach to building a brand of retail stores across the country. And I think it's a brand that resonates with a great generation, a great buyer of cannabis. And maybe this will, bridge into the younger generations that can go back and watch, the amazing movies that those guys made and, get a little more attachment to it. So, but yeah, I just think it makes a lot of sense, streamlining the back end, making these retail more simplified and streamlined so they can just focus on doing what they want to do, which is have a great store, have great products, and delight their customers with a great customer experience of getting them in the door, having products they want, and being able to transact and get them on their way.
Yeah, what an iconic brand. I was thinking about that today preparing for the show. I remember being a teenager, never seen weed, never smoked weed, and watching Up and Smoke with my brother and just laughing so hard at, remember they're smoking more the joints of dog shit or something like that? Yeah. And the cop comes and he's knocking on the door and he says, "You can keep a knocking, but you can't come in." And that
Something that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say then in college, revisiting it once I, had a 2-foot bong to enjoy it with, I'm like, this is even better. And now being a 50-year-old washed dad, I still find that kind of stuff funny. So yeah, it's cool to see them survive, have such a strong brand and a cool partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they're doing a good job on the advocacy side too. I mean, I think because of their duration, it is a name that when they want to go knocking on doors in DC, people will say, yeah, we'll take that meeting.
Yeah.
So.
Well, cool, man. We have a busy agenda here, so let's jump right into it, Morgan. Today we're going to talk about 5 hard questions, guys. I think in my mind, the show is kind of designed to be conversations that we want to be having anyway, but do so in a public format. And at this stage in the cycle, I'm a little bit less interested in talking about the less the last debt restructuring or all the new store opening or all those micro details. I think there's burning macro issues out there and questions that we all have about, what's going to come next. Because I think this year could be a really transformational year for the industry if we get a couple of breaks. So we're going to hone in on some big picture topics. And let's start with something that's on all of our minds probably every single day, Morgan. And that is, when Schedule 3 is finalized, will this kick off a lasting cannabis bull market?
Yeah. And I think, a key part of that question, I mean, obviously timing is unknown. It feels like maybe we're close. I mean, I appreciate like what Jeff Schultz has been saying out there on the X world of, every time this negative rhetoric really intensifies, if you just look back in time, it's kind of, people are predictable in some aspects. And so the negative rhetoric always seems to pile up right before there's something that's about to happen. And in an effort to, dissuade people from making progress. But it's pretty incredible to see. I mean, I don't know if you saw that, worthless piece that New York Times put out last week, but I mean, just typical trash coming from, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Biased intentions. And, so because people were asking me like, oh, did you read it? Did you read it? I was like, what's the point of reading just nonsense? There's nothing to learn from spewing, data points that are not based in data, but are just made up facts for the purpose of trying to, affect an outcome. I get no value out of that. And, I would encourage most people that if you're in the industry, like just understand what is really the intention there. And, it does ruffle some feathers with some Republicans, you can tell, that are still feel that we should not be doing this, probably for their own donor base reasons. And really, I think the overarching theme is that they perceive cannabis progress as a win for the Democrats. I don't know why they still have that view, but they do. And so they just, we're just barreling into a midterm election. And so, how that gets managed. I mean, I really would love, obviously, for Bondi to emerge from this Epstein situation sooner than later, for the benefit of our nation, but then also to get on working on other matters such as this, this step that we need her to do. Because even upon her signing it, it's not like that means it goes effective right away. But it's just continued progress. And right now we are in this perception phase, I'd say, of this emerging bull market, because obviously there's no bull market in the stock prices yet. But there certainly is a bull market behind the scenes. And, and that brings me back to the question of how do we each think of what a bull market means right now. And it's just the foundation is being laid in a lot of different areas so that when this step happens, it could be more significant and would be more reflective in prices. And, when I mention that, I'm really talking about just the consolidation cycle, as I was mentioning earlier, how much activity we're seeing in the space and seeing, groups, starting to identify what does consolidation mean and how do we establish ourselves before this happens. So there is kind of a big rush happening right now to get things going, so that they're in a position to do it. And these capital groups also understand that they want to be ahead of it too, which it's pretty wild to think of these other times where the Charlie Brown Lucy football meme comes to mind. But this is different. I mean, those other times were, the hope of Congress doing something, but this, at least we do have an executive order in hand to show that there's intention here. So I guess, putting it to you, like what do you think from how would you define a bull market right now or with S3, and what kind of factors?
Yeah, I guess I guess you got to go kind of back to MSOS, not because it looks a lot like a cap weighted index, right? And so it looks kind of like the S&P 500 for cannabis stocks. Obviously not completely, but it looks kind of market cap weighted, where it's weighted towards the bigger players, has most of the larger players in it. And so that's probably how I would measure it. It's misleading, right? Because, For example, Leaf is not an MSOS, so you can have selective stocks or ones that are small weights that won't have much of an impact. But I realize that's not reflective of the private players, and it's way overweighted to 2, 3, 4, 5 different companies. But that's probably the proxy most people would use. But to answer the question directly, Morgan, which I'm not sure that you did, is do I think this will kick off a lasting bull market? On that criteria, I say no. And I say that because I think there are 3 conditions for a cannabis bull market. Clarity on the rules. And I go back to a small cap growth manager I knew that said to me, Jesse, how can I play the game if I don't know the rules, when I tried to pitch cannabis stuff to him? And so I think people need to know what the rules are. We have to know, Morgan, 280E is going away. If 280E doesn't go away, the space is largely not investable. So 280E, we have to have certainty 280E is going to go away, number one. Number 2 is I think we need a path to further reform. Schedule 3 is by far and away the biggest and does so much for us. But I think to continue that momentum, we're going to need things like SAFER. I forgot to hit my screaming button. Sorry. And then after that, and then I think uplisting is another thing that will matter. So I think we need a path to more reform. And the last one, Morgan, that I think is the biggest. We need growth, man. Like even with the valuation unlock from a set of catalysts, it still has to be a growth story. We've got 24 adult use states. We've got half the country left. We're trying to close down that hemp channel. There's a big world outside of the US. Like there's so much growth out there for cannabis, but it sure as heck is not showing up in the numbers. And so I think that S3 alone kickstarts it, but I think it takes more to keep it fueled. And the question I wrote is very intentionally says kick off a lasting bull market. For sure, a pop with Schedule 3, probably a new floor for a lot of these stock prices, but I think it takes more than just S3 to be a lasting bull market. And the last thing I'll say is I think it's going to be a more selective bull market, where I think there's more bifurcation between all these companies, from growth to balance sheets to markets, reform leverage, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's going to be a more selective bull market when it does happen.
I mean, I can't really argue with that because, yeah, I mean, equity capital wants growth. Equity is not here for the coupon. It's here for the growth. We need that growth. We need states and operators to, show a path to doing that. I think acquisition is I know it's quote unquote inorganic growth, but who cares? If it gets their footprints more operationally efficient, more cash flow, and more growth by consolidation. I know there are state caps that can make that a bit tricky, and maybe that's why groups like Vireo are going where there's no license caps and consolidating because they can establish pretty sizable footprints and show growth in doing that. So yeah, I mean, I think it will be a bull market for some, but for many, it won't be. I don't see they're going to find a way to growth. I don't see, the amount of work they have to do to clean up their balance sheets. Where are they going to source that capital? Who's going to want to take that capital or provide that capital, knowing it's all going to balance sheet cleanup and not growth? That's a really tough proposition. And by the way, talking about a mountain of uncertain tax policies, how does that factor into the equation? And I think that's just so the good ones will. And there's just a select few that, at least in the public domain. But I think there's going to be a lot of reshuffling of assets that we're already seeing. And there's going to be a lot more of that. So those that are in the position to consolidate and be acquirers of those distressed companies' assets will prevail and will also garner the capital because they can. So a question I want to, did you, when you said those orders, S3, banking
S3 further reform and growth,
and then exchanges would you combine that with?
I'll call it further reform.
Additional reform. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we need a banking initiative to get exchanges, and I don't think we're going to get a banking reform in the next, at least, unless President Trump directs Congress to do it.
Yes.
I don't see how we get any congressional support.
Okay. We have an uplisting question coming up, so I want to dig in there more. Yeah. But if to bottom line it, do you think Schedule 3 being finalized does kick off a new lasting cannabis bull market?
It will for some, but
okay.
I think most are going to get left behind. It's too far gone. because one question mark on the S3 aspect is where is the line for when 280E
Mhm.
stops? And that is something I've heard so many different permutations of when that time stops, and that has implications of billions of dollars in taxes
Mhm. Mhm.
for when that is. And and so where I could be totally wrong is if that line in the sand, or that when the IRS post bondies signing says we'll look back all the way, we'll go back to when Biden first announced directing the HHS to review it, then I think that would mean a bull market for more.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if it's not until the effective date, obviously fewer players would benefit. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I think that's a huge input in that understanding of who's going to truly be in a bull market.
Okay. Well, let's jump to question number 2, Morgan, another very topical political one. And that question is, will the current hemp ban remain in effect in November 2026? And in fairness, I'm going to lead off on a couple of these as well. This is a tough one, man. Some of these are just not knowable things. We're just speculating. So pardon our speculation here. And I called a couple people to try to get more color on this, and the answer I got from them is that things are in the works behind the scenes. No indications of what those things are, which is totally fair enough to tell me, but no clarity on it so far. And when I look into it, Morgan, I see a couple of competing approaches. There's a bipartisan bill that's been introduced to delay the effective date until 2028, allowing some time for smarter regulations. There's also a Senate proposal to replace prohibition with a regulatory adult use framework. And number 2 sounds, well, that's kind of smart. Why don't we treat everything, one plant, one set of rules, which sounds cool, but how long would that take to happen, man? Like, you see how long states, you see how long states take. What has Pennsylvania been doing this for a decade or something? That's a joke.
Yeah.
I know it's been a couple of years, but you get the point. Like, it's so hard to figure out the state level. Now you're telling me they're going to figure out a framework at the national level, the same people that haven't, passed, safe banking in the last decade. So that seems like a stretch to me. But at the same time, I see that there's some urgency around this, Morgan. Like, if you're putting hemp plants in the ground to feed that supply chain, you need to be doing that planting in, a couple of months here. April, May is when most of those plants are going to be in the ground, and you're doing all the, dirt work and strain selection and everything else ahead of that. So there's some real urgency around it. I know there's people out there that want more time to find a carve out for low dose things, primarily beverages, which again is just wildly confusing to me. Like, why can you drink something but not throw an edible in your mouth? Makes absolutely zero sense. At the same time, I realize that there are lobby groups out there, and the alcohol lobby, beverages, could be helpful there, but makes zero sense to me. But I understand that's where people want to get. I guess if I were to bottom line it, Morgan, I think that we kick the can on this. The ban gets postponed and it gets solved in the election year of 2028.
Okay. Kelshi odds are up. I am not in that camp.
Okay.
I take the other side and say the ban will remain in effect. And it's already February. There were very few congressional people that are in support of the stay. I think they did that to appease their hemp groups. But just as I was saying about banking reform, how is there consensus on this to get this done before November, especially going into, again, a midterm and needing a lot of Republicans to sign on to this? I don't think there's enough. And as you were saying, the farmers, not only are you talking about all of what you were mentioning, just starting at the very primary aspect of they need to secure seeds. And if they don't think they can sell that crop, are they going to buy the seeds and take the chance and do all that work and maybe not get paid? So I think it's really challenging for the supply side to bank on a potential stay right at this critical period of time when they need to be making these financial decisions. I remain of the position that I've said for months of the there will be a hemp carve out, beverage carve out. It just seems like the tea leaves are screaming it. You know, Sprouts Farmers Market in Texas just launching, Texas and in Florida, you know, having beverages there. Now you're seeing the alcohol retailer and distributors lobbying for it. There was I think it was on Vote Hemp or one of the hemp groups out there. I thought had a reasonable point of you know, beverage is a lead into normalizing cannabis, which is kind of hilarious because to say like hemp is not cannabis, but hemp beverages normalize cannabis stigma, you know, I think is just like kind of the hypocrisy that it's all the same thing. It's one plant, it gets you high. It's like, that's what it's doing. And so treat it the same, but you know, giving this carve out, if that's a means of helping progress on the legal cannabis side, I think that's, you know, totally fine. But yeah, no, I think the odds are the ban stays, and you know, it dramatically shifts the landscape. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I won't do any kind of hedging on that. I'm just gonna
So
put it out there.
you think end of the year ban is in place, and are you saying ban plus carve out for beverages?
Yeah, beverage might not happen this year.
Okay.
I have no idea when beverage will happen, and I think you know, if you look at like Rhythm stock price, I mean, that thing has taken it pretty hard on the chin. But then you look at like Charlotte's Web, who's been completely, you know, on a rocket ship, you know, while everything's been getting hit really hard. Nice thing is for Rhythm is they have a balance sheet and a position to stay. Oh, and I should also say, I mean, Rhythm Señorita is also in the United Center in Chicago now. I mean, they just did that post like with this ban going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just wonder if there's some larger powers that be that do understand that there is a path here for beverage and why they would be putting these things in there.
Yeah, it seems great. Yeah, no, with Ben's, you know, family background in the beverage industry, that seems like that could be a leading indicator.
Right. Now, one question I have is, well, if it's banned, where are they getting their inputs from?
Yeah.
You know, what's the supply side for beverage if there's a ban? So like, are farmers going to only be licensed to grow if they're selling only to beverage companies? You know what I mean? Like, that's a weird aspect of a regulation that I don't know how you resolve that.
Okay.
So,
well, good. I'm kind of glad we disagree on some of these. And again, guys, like with this hemp stuff, you know, Morgan may have more of an edge on it, you know, given that you're doing more business in the space. But I'm just trying to read the tea leaves, you know, without actually being there for the conversations, which is always difficult. So I don't feel super firm on that one, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I mean, alcohol, they're no dummies. Yeah. They see their market share, they see their sales, their units, and they have all the shelf space capacity, capability, and the consumers want it. So I think there's a reasonable path there. I just don't know when or what it'll look like to make it all happen. But alcohol is also very successful in understanding how to get things done in DC.
Yep.
So
let's go to question number 3, which touches on the state-led growth story, Morgan. There's a guy that used to say cannabis is a state-led growth story with a series of hard-to-time political catalysts. And on the state-led side, that's been one of our big problems. We've had part of the intoxicating hemp market taking away TAM. We've had price compression, and we've had a lack of new states turning on. So the third question I want to ask, my third hard question is, Morgan, will two of the following 3 states flip adult use in 2026? Those 3 states are Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida, and broader industry growth will resume.
Well, I mean, good thing is it seems like Virginia is, right? I mean, it's happening. It seems like it's like, and I know Virginia's got a history of, you know, with the governor, you get everything in place and the governor refuses to sign, but things have changed. So
yeah, new governor, right? What is it? Youngkin's out, and is it Abigail Spanberger or something like that?
Yeah. So, you know, we'll see what the devil in the details of what the program looks like and I'm already hearing of like license transfer fees and ways of, which are just
5
another
million
way of,
bucks. Did you see that? 5 million bucks
yeah,
to adult convert to adult use.
yeah. Said another way is just a more tax on the industry and trying to get it from the big players that will fork it over. What that means for smaller groups is a disproportionate negative impact for them. Means they'll probably have to sell to a larger group that can pay that conversion fee, because we see time and time again that if you stay medical in an adult use market, your sales decline. You miss it because the vast majority, are not going to go through with getting a medical card. Medical cards expire, yada yada yada, and people just want to go in, show their ID that they are legal of age, and buy it and go on with their day. So Virginia's moving along. Like, we'll see what the nuances of it look like. Pennsylvania, as we had that great conversation with Jason Wild and Ziad a couple weeks ago, said it very clearly. The state wants to see S3, and then they are ready to proceed. They just want to follow the government in doing that. They don't want to be ahead of them. We'll look to groups like TerraSend to hold them to task. If that's what they're told they're going to do, then damn it, do it.
Yeah.
Like, don't wait a minute longer. The people of Pennsylvania deserve it. So so I think there's reasonable expectation for Pennsylvania to move along. I mean, I think as a state, seems like they are pro business, and it seems like they've moved off of this state controlled system. It was interesting. Minnesota opened its first state-run dispensary. Was it a couple weeks ago now? And I can't help but wonder, is like, so does that mean all the state employees involved there have now trouble with getting mortgages and bank accounts? Are they paying 280E on that store? Like, what are they doing? But those details don't matter. But anyway, the point is like, I'm glad that it seems like PA is going more of a business focused model, because I haven't heard much around the state run thing, which is good. Obviously, Florida, they had a voter deadline for gathering signatures. That deadline came and went. The state says they didn't have enough signatures. Smart and Safe, the coalition in Florida said they did. The state said we invalidated a bunch of these that were not done properly, and Smart and Safe said, well, we did do that. You just changed the rules at the last minute. So there's a bit of a battle going on there. Unfortunately, for the people of Florida, I think it's tough because the state's MO seems to just be to run out the clock and prevent it from getting on the ballot. So I'd say 2 out of the 3 seems like we're moving in the right direction. Florida still seems to be the holy grail that we'll continue to strive for. But it seems like there needs to be quite a bit of a reset in Florida, political regime to improve the odds there. But I've heard it's not over yet. I'm sure the groups in Florida will continue to fight the battle as they should, and try to make it a reality for not just the people that live in Florida, but for all the people that visit Florida. But right now it seems like a tough situation and hard to overcome with the way that they can kind of just slow play it. So yeah, that's kind of my synopsis of those 3. What about you?
Yeah, so I just want to take one step back and like focus on what the problem is. And I was looking at some hoodie data earlier today that says the trailing 1 year growth across 11 key MSO states is 3.4%. And that's not stellar in and of itself, but within that data, that's with New York and Ohio both growing at over 20%. So let me ask you, Morgan, if you're not in New York and Ohio, how are you doing at the top for top line growth at this point?
Not good.
Yes. And so that's the problem. Yeah. And so that's the problem, is we need some of these conversions, because absent these conversions, what happens is you continue to suffer price compression in more mature markets. Pricing was down 11% year over year and volumes were up 15%. So sometimes we look and we see, dollars being spent in cannabis markets going down. We think, oh, people are using cannabis less. Usually not the case. Usually means people are buying more, like we're seeing unit growth here, but price compression is more than offsetting the unit growth. So some of these newer markets like New York and Ohio are both doing great, well, most of the other more mature markets are suffering price compression, and a lot of those markets you're seeing, actual, dollar spend going down. And so that's the problem here that I see at the macro level for, a diversified MSO in the industry in general. And so we've been waiting, on these states, feels like for years in some cases. And just to run through them quickly, Morgan, on Virginia, we talked about there's a new governor who is more pro-cannabis, and I think we'll get it done. There's a House bill that's pushing for November. There's a Senate bill that's pushing for January 2027. And I think, if there's anything I've learned over the last decade, Morgan, it's that everything in cannabis takes longer and costs more than you think. And so I think, of course, this takes longer. If it happens in November, I'd absolutely be shocked. If it happened, with the Senate bill date of January, that too would surprise me. And so put me down as a no on Virginia. I mean, a yes on Virginia in general, but a no on Virginia in 2026. Happy to be pleasantly surprised, but I'm guessing that gets kicked into early next year. Pennsylvania, I agree with you, at the high level, Morgan. I think that does pass this. I think that does pass sometime this year after Schedule 3. Whether it goes into effect this year, I'm not as confident about that. So, I'd say that probably passes this year, maybe goes into effect in 2027. And then, yeah, Florida, I think Morgan has a couple of issues. First is we've got to get over the signature problem and get the signature count right for it to get on the ballot. Last I saw, we were at 880,000 short, and it's being contested. So 2 steps here in Florida. Number 1, got to make it on the ballot. Number 2, once on the ballot, you don't need 50%, you need 60%. And that was a challenge for us in 24. Yeah.
Mhm.
And 24, would we get 56% in change, if I recall correctly?
Mhm.
And, Hershey always talks about that our best chances to pass are in broader election turnouts, which are in the presidential cycle, not in the midterm cycle. I actually heard Brady Cobb on Dale's report, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and he was saying the same thing. He thinks there could be some challenges on the turnout side, and if we couldn't get it done, 2 years ago, he's not super confident it'll happen in 26. He's much more optimistic about 28. So I'm a no on Florida as well. So I think we're going to get there more quickly. If I had to look through my very cloudy crystal ball, I think PA probably passes this year, kicks off next year. I think Virginia passes early next year, starts sometimes next year. I think Florida probably, unfortunately, kicks the can to 2028.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good to clarify too. Is like passing an effective. We've had various
Yeah.
forms of 18 months to 6 months to effective immediately. You'd hope that as states that are so many years post these other states converting, that they wouldn't feel like they need quite as much time, but we'll have to see. Nice thing is if we do get something later this year with like VA and PA, people are already starting to look towards 27 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're already kind of through the year and kind of have a good sense of where it is, and then looking towards the next year, and markets tend to be forward looking supposedly on growth. And so if there's more to happen there, then, it's less of a sting than like if they pass right now and said it wouldn't go effective until 27. That's a little harder for people to look forward that, a year plus. So
question number 4, Morgan. Let's switch gears and keep it moving. And this one's a hard one. This one is a hard one for me. Of all these, I probably thought about this one the most. And the question there, Morgan, is will 3 of the 5 tier 1 cannabis companies remain in the top 5 a decade from now? And so we're talking about Curaleaf, GTI, Trulieve, Verano, and Cresco. That's what I think of as tier 1s. We could probably have a separate conversation about, if we need to restructure, that definition. But let's use those 5 diversified MSOs and look in our crystal ball and say, a decade from now, are 3 of these, I think for sure not all 5, but will 3 of these still be in the top 5 cannabis companies in 10 years? And Jerry Deriviani and I were having some back and forth about this on X. And in my opinion, there, Morgan, is that it's going to be a no for me. And I think that a national cannabis market is going to change things substantially in the next decade. If we said will these players be 3 of the top 5 in 5 years, I think that's more likely because I think that interstate commerce at a national, cannabis market probably takes between 3 and 7 years, maybe a decade on the outside. It's one of those things that's super hard to predict. I don't think it's imminent, but I don't think it's, much longer than, 5 or 7 years away. And I think that if you have 2 million square feet of indoor spread across 12 different states, I just don't think that's an awesome construct for where the world is heading. I think that retail continues to be valuable, especially, in certain, limited license areas where you have great stores. But I think the whole supply chain shifts around. And that's really, one of the thesis with Leaf is that we're trying to build for the future of a national cannabis market by having a massive farm for biomass in California, so that we can compete really well in today's California market, but with over 8 million square feet of cultivation potential at Salisbury Canyon Ranch. That gives us the ability to be a leading exporter of concentrates across the U.S. as well. Similar idea, obviously, with Glasshouse on the flower side. Have you followed, Morgan, what's going on with that Green Horizons facility in what's that, up by Palm Desert?
Who's Green Horizons?
Am I butchering the name there? The guy's name is Los, and it's that massive mixed light facility out there.
No idea, actually.
Doesn't
Weird.
Anyway, yeah, I'll send you some details on it when we get off here. But it's just a huge bulk flower facility that's selling bulk wholesale to other brands. And so I just bring it up is that I think that the future, I don't know if it necessarily looks like that facility, I don't know it very well, but I think the value of the California operators, maybe some other things on the West Coast, which is the West Coast operators, gets much more valuable over that time frame. So I think that causes disruption, and I think these footprints with 50,000, 30,000 square feet of indoor, 100,000 square feet of indoor spread across a bunch of states, they're just wildly inefficient, and a lot of them aren't growing very good flowers. So I think that over time, a lot of those really turn into like pickleball courts and bowling alleys, and there certainly will be cultivation in each state for sure, especially at the craft level and at the local level. There could be, you could still grow some of it locally, but I think a good portion of that supply chain shifts. So I think that's one problem. I also think that balance sheets matter. And what you were talking about, Morgan, like how does this shake out with 280E? What happens to these, tax provisions out there, hundreds of millions of dollars in IRS debt. On top of that, some really levered balance sheets because of the problems that we're talking about before. There's been a lack of financing in the industry. Rates have been high, and there hasn't been a lot of growth. That's caused, balance sheets to keep going one way while growth is going the other way. And I think that probably causes some shakeup. So I think balance sheets could become a problem for some of these top 5. Then the last question is, do these top 5 all still exist? Is there a merger there? Do you bolt on an Ascend or a TerraSend to a TrueLeaf, to add a New Jersey and a Illinois in some cases, depending on which partnership you ended up there, along with a Florida piece, when adult use happens. So we see some consolidation there. So for me, for those 3 reasons, I say no. I think we see some shakeup, but I don't think three of the tier ones are the leaders in a decade from now because of the influence of a national cannabis market, balance sheet problems, and consolidation as well.
Well, this isn't a very exciting, because I can't take a counter position because
okay.
maybe I'll try to take it a step further. I think there will be 0.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
Because in 10 years, I don't even know if we're going to have, any large independent cannabis companies. There'll be anyone that's doing a great job and, on the backside of this consolidating is probably going to get acquired by an even bigger company, alcohol, tobacco, whatever it might be. So that, to have them as a standalone, I don't think so. And then they've got the balance sheet to restructure these things in the manner you're talking about, where you have massive scaled, centralized grow capacity, you have massive manufacturing scaled again, and then you've got a retail footprint. And that's, I think the pricing is going to dictate that. I mean, you think of, the beer industry and wine. I mean, sure, there's, just as you said, there's niche, small, cool, like doing their thing, micro brews, small craft wineries that are doing nice things. And then you've got the large scaled, mass format. And you just see how consumer preferences are changing. I just saw, was it last week, Headset noted that vape is now the #1 category. It's surpassed flower. So consumers are moving to more of a, finished good kind of thing. I think beverage will probably be a very large category in 10 years as well, because again, it's just a normalized form factor. So I think retail as a licensing is something that has permanence, because that's really just driven by the states and their wanting to have like a way that they can look in and say, okay, these stores are selling these kinds of products and they're done so under these regulatory mandates, so we're okay with that. So I do see that having permanence, because I don't see like, and who knows, I mean, 10 years is a long time, but I mean, also not a lot of time if you're to try to say like, will all cannabis products just be sold in supermarkets and like liquor stores and things like that? I don't think so. I really don't. Just because it's not been, it's such a blending of a regulatory scheme, and every year that goes by that we have a regulatory scheme that is solidifying the need for retail, I think it's just a new kind of retail that will have some permanence. But all of these, restructuring of upstream from there, I think is a wide open conversation. So I think these companies will look vastly different than they are today in that 10-year time span. And I think, it's just price is going to drive it. And it's just pretty simple. You can't have a $20,000 or 20,000 square foot indoor facility with massive overhead costs at those price levels. I mean, it just happens. And so that just means we need more scale and more centralization to have viable supply.
And Brian says that's a rational take, Morgan. Yoo-hoo. Good job.
All right.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And on that data on the flower versus vape side, I think that was for California, and vapes took over flowers #1 in the rankings. But even crazier, man, did you see the Gen Zers out there, those young kids? They are spending 45% on vapes versus 22% on flower. So twice as much on vapes as they are on flower. So as the old Wayne Gretzky says about skating to where the puck is going towards vapes. And I would say the puck is going towards those discrete, easy, finished goods form factors.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, especially for the older generations that are cranky and don't like the smell of weed. Vape and beverage, and gummies you don't have that problem. Yeah. So I think there's, just like everything else, there's a permanence of flower, but it's going to just be a small niche kind of thing. Yeah, and that's fine. But yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I think that's great data point to look at what the next generation is, how they're behaving, and follow that, because it's going to continue to grow as they get more states legal and these folks come into the space. So yeah, it's pretty wild to think 10 years, 2036. Are we still going to be doing higher exchanges in 2036?
I hope so. I think we can. What do you think?
I mean, as long as we continue to have great support from groups like Flowhub, sure. Keep it going.
All right, man, we're doing okay in time. We got one last question here, and that is, a U.S. plant-touching MSO, will they be uplisted to the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange by the end of the year? And Morgan, you are up first.
I'm up first. So, yeah, I think this is a good question, because I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the exchanges and say, like, what has changed for them to get comfort around doing this? And I know they don't look at all their listings. So I know there's no like, well, if this company is here, then why is this company not allowed to be here? Because clearly they have not done that. If you have like a Weed Maps, that's revenue is 100% derived basically from retailers, primary coming. So they're clearly collecting payments from federally illegal businesses. They're supposed to be state legal businesses paying them. they're allowed to be on the exchanges. You have IIP that's on the exchange, that's had defaults and had to take over assets. These are cannabis operating assets for failure to pay rent, and they're still on the exchange. I know they don't operate them, but they are still in ownership control of them, and they were allowed to be there. So, I guess from like a testing question of like, well, if they're allowed to be there, then why are these, the ones that are actually just operating businesses? How do they differentiate the two? I don't think there's a good answer to that. I don't think they would ever admit an answer to that because it could expose themselves from a legal perspective. But what they could also look at is, okay, well, if the administration is softening their stance on it, moving it from this deadliest substance to still, a pretty ridiculous schedule position, but we've got to be realistic that it's not going to go deschedule from Schedule 1. So, but the progression of that happening, I think it's going to change. I think that with some clarity around, okay, so we're effective, we're good. I do wonder how the exchanges will look at some of these companies from, they want companies that will come and list and be, continue to be listed. So will they be looking at their balance sheets? I know you have said that several times today, and I certainly appreciate that. I'm a man of, I like good balance sheets. So prefer good balance sheets. Will they look at that? Will they look at their tax position and say, well, do you need to resolve this tax situation with the IRS? And if you've, clarified that position, is that going to be a gating issue? Obviously, they got to have the normal listing requirements from a governance perspective and whatnot. So, if I just pressure test that against several of these companies, I think there's, if we get effective sooner than later, call it summer, fall, I think there's a reasonable shot for a couple to make it there. You could see how GTI has a pretty clear path already with what they're already establishing with Rhythm. They could just reconsolidate into a NASDAQ company. But others that like TerraSend and Cura, they're already on an exchange in Canada. I know it's the venture, but they're still on an exchange. Bring them back in and, already re-IPO. So, they've already kind of gone through the steps. So say it rests on Bondi's shoulders on the probability of us getting there. But, if that happens sooner than later, I would say the odds are sooner, or actually there's a reasonable shot of at least some, not a lot, but some could get there. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're on similar pages here. And again, what having not been in touch with the exchanges personally, I'm aggregating conversations that I've had in the last few months with most of the larger MSOs and people plugged into that situation. And I've been told by a couple of tier ones that they expect within a month of Schedule 3 being effective that they'll be able to move to the NASDAQ. And those are based on conversations they've had with the exchanges. So that makes me optimistic. On the flip side, you think about, I think Jason said this a couple of weeks ago in the podcast, that it could take more explicit language. So could something come out, with the final rule? Might it take, the climb and safer combo, which I know you're not super optimistic about, but could there be some explicit uplisting language in there? So I think there is, like, embedded in this, there's a question about, is Schedule 3 enough? And even if you take the top 5 or 6 MSOs that I've talked to about it, there's mixed opinions on that. Some say additional language is not needed. Jason, who's a very smart and informed individual, felt differently about it. So you have conflicting things from, leadership at, premier MSOs. So, most bullish case, I think it's just Schedule 3 gets them comfortable and we see that movement right after. I think the other case, a second case, would be that Schedule 3 in and of itself is not enough. But by the time that goes effective, do we get a safer climate type thing? Or do we get some sort of, explicit, something explicit, with the final rule about exchanges? If Trump cared and understood, which I don't know if he cares or if he understands, but this is the most America first thing ever. Like, one of the weirdest things about the whole industry is that plant touching US MSOs, cannabis made in America, list in Canada, and the Canadian ones doing nothing in the US list in the US. Like, explain that. That's I think one of the most backward things about the industry. And I don't think it would be hard to get support with this America first agenda to, move these American cannabis companies to US exchanges. So I think at the macro level, there's a bit of a tailwind there in terms of how Trump and his team, wants to be perceived. So I'm going to end up being a yes here too. There's a qualifier of the yes or something that I feel uncertain about. Is S3 enough, or do we have to get something like climb or some more explicit language? But I don't think that's impossible to see that happening in the next 6 or 8 months here. And then in terms of how this plays out, yeah, the larger companies I think will be the first ones to move. Morgan, you mentioned GTI to Rhythm. You have Curaleaf and TerraSend on the TSX, which is a nice move to the NASDAQ. And also keep your eye on Verano. They went to the SIBO rather than to the TSX. Aaron Miles there, has a lot of experience with exchanges. And they have very specific reasons that they've charted the path that they have. So keep an eye on, Verano as well. So that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top kind of top 6 companies out there. And I'm sure the ones I didn't name, which would be like a Cresco and Trulieve, I'm sure they have their own plans to get there as well. But I think the path is laid. I think we're close, and I'm going to say yes that one of them makes it this year, which would be awesome. Like, even I think that with Leaf we want to get there too. I don't think it's realistic that we'll be in that first group, but to start that momentum, man, and get a couple of these companies, even just one company, the impact it would have for them to lay that groundwork at a U.S. cannabis company, plant touching operator, producing, selling cannabis, listed on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. I think that would be just massive for the industry.
Well, yeah, we probably cannot rule out, if that is the case, that Tilray will be buying U.S. assets, operating assets, and they're already on an exchange. So they could front run some of this by, buying up, whether it is a smaller pubco or going and buying private companies, because they're already there and already have access to the unlimited printing press of ATMs and whatnot. So they could do something very quickly ahead of any of these guys that are trying to do it. They could front run them. So, and I guess you could probably put Canopy
I was going to say
in that as well. Yeah. Not saying that they, nothing from a perspective of from an investment, but just saying that they just have the potential to do that. They could act pretty quick. Sundial, SNDL with their, they could consolidate these assets into one, and same thing. Like, it's so there's other functions. It's I understand the hypocrisy of how we're currently functioning, but that could level set pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I like the show. How did you enjoy 5 hard questions?
Yeah, it's fun to go through these things. I know we don't really get to go into it much with all the great guests we have, because we want to talk to them and hear what they have to say. But this is and Brian, yes, you should. Yeah, it's fair to mention Village Farms as well. I kind of think of Village Farms as like more of that 10-year thing, like we were just talking about, where I could see them being not saying that they're wanting to acquire Leaf, but I mean, it's kind of their DNA of large-scaled ag.
Yeah.
And saying, like, what they wanted to do in Texas that they, weren't able to do, but another bite at the apple by coming in and trying to secure large production in the US.
Yeah, thanks for everyone that does listen live and participates in the live chat and the comments. It's always good to see what you guys are thinking out there. And thank you again to Flowhub for making today's show possible. This is the retail platform trusted by the best dispensaries in America. If you haven't evaluated your tech stack in years, there's a good chance you're leaving money and efficiency on the table. If you're a serious operator, see what's possible at flowhub.com. So thanks to Flowhub, Kyle, and the team for the support of the show. Very much appreciate that. And just a little bit of behind the scenes, we're planning on doing about one of these solo shows a quarter. Maybe we'll have 2 of them, but certainly we'll be doing probably one of them a quarter, but otherwise leaning into some guests. We're trying to book the show out a little bit further, so we have some very senior MSO leadership coming on the show, hopefully in March, earnings season not too far away. I think it kicks off, Morgan, like 2 weeks from today. I think 25th,
weeks,
26th, something like that.
Yeah. It's happening fast. Here we go.
Yeah. So we'll have some more data, coming out then. And yeah, I think things could pick up, quite a bit here in the next, few weeks or few months. If we get some reform at our backs, just the number of open-ended questions, like there's like 5 super important questions that, we should have more visibility here in the next 12 months or so. So where were those quiet periods? Engagement is down, in terms of, social media stuff. I'm guessing listenership to, cannabis investing shows, although we have great support, probably continues to be down while, MSO share prices continue to be depressing. But I don't think this is the way that we're going long-term, guys. Like, Morgan and I talk a lot behind the scenes, and, the share prices don't reflect the optimism that we're seeing, from operators, the deals we're getting done, the momentum that's building, the way financing opportunities are evolving. So I expect us to have a bright finish to 2026, and I'm excited for it.
Hell yeah. Me too. I'm excited for some of these things, like I said, get to cross the finish line so deals get announced and people see, that there's real action happening. Because, it's happening. I mean, we just can't say much yet, but
Yeah.
things are moving. So.
Well, cool, man. Good show today. Appreciate the time. We'll see you back here, guys, in 2 weeks. And thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and throw us a like and subscribe over there. The YouTube channel continues to grow, so any support you can give us on that side is always appreciated. So I got to jump to a board meeting. I'll let you go, Morgan. We'll talk to you guys again soon. The views expressed as podcasts are provided for informational purposes only. Nothing we say should be considered research or a recommendation. All investing involves risk, including the loss of principal.